For those not in the know, a quiche is basically an egg pie, and it's super simple. You can make it with a crust or without a crust, so if you're keto or if you're gluten intolerant, you can easily make a quiche without a crust. But I personally love a quiche with a crust, so that's what we're gonna make today. One of the things that goes into our quiche today is a leek. Leeks are a type of onion. They're in the onion family, they're an allium. Leeks are kind of unique. They're not as like oniony as an onion, and they have kind of like a more subtle flavor, and they're delicious. You can see that this particular leek has a lot of white part. So the white part is what we're going to eat. And sometimes you might find leeks that have like less white. And if that's the case, you need to buy more leeks because this is really what we want. This stuff actually does smell like onion. And you can chop it up and use it, but it's not very soft. It can be kind of hard to eat, but it is totally edible if you want to use it. But today we're going to be working with this part. So first things first with leeks, we have to wash it. Now, leeks are kind of an interesting little monster. So to chop and wash a leek, what we do is we take this leek and we cut off the end. This one already has the end cut off from the grocery store because there can have a root end here with roots growing off the end. You just cut that off. And then we're going to cut it right here. And then if you want to save this and use it, you can. Otherwise, it's compostable. And then we need to wash it. And so to wash a leek, what you do is you actually take your knife and you cut almost all the way to the base, but not quite all the way. What you do is you stick your knife in here and then you slice. And you're slicing it in half, but you're leaving the bottom intact. So the reason we want to wash these is because there can be like little sandy bits in these layers. You can see these little layers here. And as they grow, they come up through the ground, and sometimes they can capture sand in between these layers. And so what we do basically is by connecting the base right here, we're able to just run this under the tap and rinse it. Just rinse, and then they all stay together in one piece. Because if you were to cut them all the way through, they're actually a real pain in the butt to chop when they're like flying all over the place. It's much easier to chop them when they're just in one piece like this. So I'm gonna go wash these and then I'll be back. Alrighty, we've got our washed leek, and now I'm going to show you how to chop it. So this leek is cut in half almost all the way to the base, and we can just slice it this way, and then you end up with these longer slices that are about half of the circumference of the leek. You can make an additional incision and cut it this way, so you have quarter slices. For this, we kind of want like little bit longer bits for the leek, so I'm going to leave it in half, or split in half like this. And so when we slice it, we're going to end up with longer bits. And then in the middle, you'll notice that the slices are narrower, so they'll be a little bit thinner in the middle. But this will give us a good texture for our quiche. So we've got it right here, and we've got our knife. We've got our fingers tucked, and we're just going to slice really easily. And we're going to go right through the leek. And it's super easy. Like, we basically just cut that all the way down to the very base, and that's it. When it comes to building a quiche, you can put all sorts of delicious things in it. You can put veggies, you can put meat, you can put cheese, you can put a lot of different things. There's a couple key tips though, and one of them is that if you're cooking with raw meat, it's not going to work. You need to actually pre-cook your meat before you put it in the quiche, because the quiche doesn't get hot enough to cook the meat completely. And it might get hot enough for the meat to be safe, but it's going to have like a weird rubbery texture, and it's not going to be good. It's a similar thing when cooking with vegetables, right? So if you're cooking with greens, like, you want to nuke them in the microwave for 30 seconds to soften them. And if they're a really hearty green like kale, you probably want to go up to a minute, because you want to make them soft. Otherwise, they're not going to cook completely in your quiche, and when you eat your quiche, they're going to get stuck in your teeth. And if you're cooking with like hard vegetables like broccoli or cauliflower, and you're putting those in your quiche, you want to nuke them for up to 3 or 4 minutes ahead of time so that they're soft, because there's no way they're going to soften in the quiche while it's baking. When it comes to seasoning your quiche, there's 2 really important factors. One of them is salt, and one of them is acid. Some people think it's a little weird to add lemon juice to eggs, but there's a reason for that. And it's because scientifically, the lemon juice or the vinegar or whatever acid you want to use changes the pH of the eggs, actually helps the proteins coagulate it a little differently so they have a better mouthfeel. So I like to add a good teaspoon of lemon juice to my quiche mixture, just because you can't really taste the lemon in it, but it gives it like a brightness and a softness that you won't have without it. The second most important factor is salt. And like, I can go on for days about salt, but salting your eggs are so important. Like, eggs without enough salt just taste really flat. They taste fatty, they taste rich without any real redeeming flavors. And the salt not only cuts through the fattiness, but it actually elevates the flavor so it tastes a lot better. I would actually go as far as to say you want to add twice as much salt as you normally do if you're salt conservative. And that's because like having a little extra salt is actually what makes restaurant eggs so good. So you got to work with your own palate and figure out what's best for you. But I suggest experimenting with salt and eggs and taking it right to the level where it's almost too much, but it's just perfect. And find out if you can find out where that level is for you, your eggs are going to be amazing for the rest of your life. For today's quiche, what we're going to do is blend the filling in a blender. I like using a blender for a quiche because it aerates the eggs just a little bit and gives them like a beautiful kind of souffle-like texture. Like you can easily do it without a blender. You can just whip them by hand, or you can use an immersion stick blender if that's what you got. That works really well. But the key to using a blender with eggs is to not over blend them. So we're going to be using a Vitamix, which is like a mega super duper blender. And if you're using a really powerful blender like a Vitamix or a Blendtec or a Ninja or something along those lines, you want to turn it down to like a speed 1 or 2, because if you over blend your eggs, you will actually whip so much air into them that your quiche will actually get really big and deflate and not look right when it's done. And in some cases, it might actually overflow. And if you're working with just like a regular everyday blender, like an Oster or like whatever, or a hand blender, like you still want to keep an eye on how much you blend it. Like I would not blend my egg filling for a quiche longer than like 10 seconds. And I'll show you exactly how long to blend it for when we build our quiche.